Hello, this is Christy from Graphicious. As you probably know, TechSmith releases major versions of their software every year around springtime, and this year is no exception. Camtasia 2021 is releasing in a few weeks on April 27th. There are quite a few new features, functions, improvements, and workflow tweaks included in this version. In this video, I'm walking through the major new features of Camtasia 2021 one by one. Some of the features have been requested for a long time by the Camtasia users community. There are also some interface tweaks, new functions, optimizations, workflow tweaks. If you don't have Camtasia 2021, you can download a free trial version using the link in the description. However, if you're watching this video before the launch date, the link may not be available. But if it's after April 27th, feel free to click it to download Camtasia 2021. In my next few videos ahead of the launch, I will also be covering each of these new functions in detail. In this video, I'm showing examples for some of them as to how they used to work in Camtasia 2020 or previous versions, and also how they look now and how they work in Camtasia 2021 with examples appropriate for each one. Before we begin, if you have not subscribed to my channel, I would appreciate it if you'd subscribe, like this video, and share it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. So, let's have a look at the most important new features in Camtasia 2021. So Camtasia 2021 has a new redesigned start screen. It has pretty much the same options as the previous one, and you've got new project, new from template, new recording, and open an existing project, obviously, some learning resources, and some help links that take you to the online help. And also what is new is the recorder is different. It seems to have lost some of the options you had with the previous recorder. Like, all you have is the 4 different panels. They are a bit larger, and you've got the recording area that you want to define. You've got the camera turned on and off. You got the microphone and the system audio, which you can also enable from this capture menu right here. If you choose to record a full screen, you have a very limited set of options here. You've got the widescreen and the HD versions and the full screen, and then if you want to choose a region like this, you can click choose region, and then you can drag the region you want to record. Camtasia 2021 includes 75 new transitions built in. So when you start a new project, you go to your transitions here. If you have some media loaded, if I place some media on my timeline, you go to the transitions, and now you will see that you have much more transitions here. It's almost very hard to browse through them. There's so many here, and I'll be making a video showing all of these transitions one by one, but here you can filter them by kind of type, like 3D, blurs, divisions, fades, and so on. So you can at least filter them down a bit. You know, they work the same way like the other ones. So action wipe, you just drag them between 2 clips, and there you go. So obviously you're going to have to explore these on your own. I'll also do a video about the transitions soon and showcase all of them if you don't have Camtasia 2021, just so you can check them out. Another cool visual effect that was added in Camtasia 2021 is the media matte effect. So I go to visual effects and I have media matte. Now, the media matte works with another object that you place above your clip. For example, if you go to an annotation, and let's suppose I want to use this dialogue or maybe a shape like a star, you put it on top of your animation here like that. Watch what happens. Now, if you wanted your video to be visible only inside of this shape, you know, like maybe have a circle, a video in a circle, like a talking head kind of thing, for example, you had to do all these funny effects with the track mattes. Like, you had to put this object on top of the other object, and you need to right click on your track and change it to alpha or alpha invert or all the other objects. Well, in Camtasia 2021, this is very easy to do now, and it doesn't have to change your tracks anymore. You just visual effects, you go to visual effects here, and you use media matte, and you apply this to the object you want to become a mask. So if you drag it on top of the star, you immediately see the effect was added. So now my video below is inside of this area because it is a matte. So this works not like that without affecting your tracks, and you can move this object around, of course, and your mask will move with it. And also this will move, you know, your bottom clip. If you want to move that one, okay, you are still free to move that. The effect will still work. This also gives the same options like you used to have it in the tracks, where, you know, if you right click here and you say luminosity or luminosity invert, alpha invert, all these things are actually available now on the media matte property panel here. So by default you have the alpha mode. You can have intensity, so you can see now this has turned into a highlight, just like the usual highlight annotation that you had in Camtasia. But also you can change this to be something else like alpha invert, which means it's going to cut out that part of from the video below, and it will just you know, kind of hide it. Now alpha might be the most useful here because you can quickly mask objects inside of a shape. This doesn't have to be just a shape. I have an image here with my logo on it. I can make this into a mask. So all I have to do is just go to visual effects, drag the media matte on top of this, and it becomes a mask. My image happens to be a PNG with transparency with rounded corners, so you can see now that my image has become a mask. You know, you can play with this any way you like, but you know, the idea is that you can quickly now mask objects using this track matte inside of a shape. So you can make this as long as you like. You can select everything and group it. So there you go. You've got an element within a group with a mask applied to it that you don't have to worry about changing the track blending mode or whatever you want to call that, the alpha for the track itself. So you're now free to move this group around and do whatever you like. The effect will be preserved inside of the group. So that's quite cool. Camtasia 2021 introduces motion blur. This is a visual effect you can add to a clip when you animate it. So it is an effect that depends on the animation and specifically the animation speed. Just any object, it's an annotation with text on it. So I have an animation to this one. So if you see it, it's moving. You can't see any blur on this. And if I stop between the two endpoints of this animation, you can notice there is no motion blur here. But if you go to visual effects and you have now this motion blur effect, you can use that on your clip. You don't use it on your animation, just on your clip. So it applies for the entire clip. So notice now that if I'm in the middle of my animation, the item is blurred like that because it's moving. So you can see that it's moving. So this gives it a bit of a realistic movement effect. And this works also for images. So let's look at this. This is a simple image that I'm moving from left to right. If I add the motion blur effect to it, you will see it's blurred. The only difference you're going to have here, you can option panel here is going to allow you to change the intensity of the blur effect. This is subject to the animation. So you may want to do this before you animate, because look, it adds a new animation keyframe here if I'm in the middle of the animation. So if I wanted to do this, for example, I have the motion blur effect added to my object. I can put the intensity all the way up, and now I will add an animation to my object here and move it to the right just to generate a movement. So you notice now that in the middle of the animation I have blur. This is influenced by the speed of your animation. So if I make this animation shorter, you will see that the blur effect intensifies like this. You see, this is the very short animation and versus the longer animation. If I make this animation longer, I am in the middle of the animation here, you can hardly notice. There is still a bit of blur there, but it is much more reduced. Obviously, this effect is sensitive to your animation speed. The faster you move your objects on screen, the longer the blur effect will be. So this will give you quite a nice realistic effect. Another cool feature that was requested by many users on the Camtasia forums was to be able to create proxy videos. So this has now been added to Camtasia. So I have 4 clips here on my media bin. So I'm just going to drag all of them to my timeline. Some of these clips are 60 frames per second. So this is going to be very helpful for you when you're editing higher resolution videos or you have a lot of clips and Camtasia is kind of slow. You can see that I'm scrubbing through my timeline and my video is not smooth at all. In fact, it's very choppy, and the more I go, and it takes like a second for it to update. So this is obviously not a very good editing experience. So naturally you would like to have proxies to work with this. Proxy is actually a lower resolution clip from your main clip that is linked right in the timeline, and you can cut it, you can edit, you can apply effects and everything to it, and everything's going to move smooth until you are ready to export, in which case it's going to export with the actual full resolution video. So this is going to make your editing much faster. If you have clips on your timeline and you want to use the proxy feature, all you have to do this is in the media bin here. You select the video clips, you right click on it and you say proxy video, create proxy video. And it's going to take a few seconds. It's actually surprisingly fast. You can see the progress bar here. It's created a proxy, and now my proxy video has a little yellow circle next to it. And also you can see the same in the timeline down here. It has that circle next to the icon of the video. I'm going to make it proxy for all of these clips, so you can do a proxy for multiple clips at the same time. Right click and do the proxy. You're going to see it's generating these at the same time. When you scrub your timeline, watch this. The proxies have been generated and you don't have to modify your videos on the timeline. They will be automatically replaced and linked with the proxies. And watch this. See how fast this is now scrubbing on my timeline. Everything is so smooth. On my higher resolution screen, I can see that these clips are a little lower resolution than they are originally, obviously, but look at this. You cannot compare this editing experience where you're scrubbing really quickly. So this was a major requirement from the users of Camtasia, because as you add more clips to your project, it becomes slower and slower and slower. And obviously, that's subject to your hard drive speed. So this is a massive improvement. And what I've noticed is that if you have a clip that you've used in a previous project and you've created proxies for it, then if you close it and you create a new project, so look at these clips, right? So I've just created proxies for it. Let's suppose that I save this project and I create a new project in Camtasia. And watch this. I go to my hard drive again and import the same clips from the hard drive location, not from the proxy location, right? Because I don't even, I'm not sure where that is yet. It's in the settings. But watch this. I'm bringing in the same clips from my original folder. And look at this. They already show that they have proxies generated. So Camtasia remembers where it saved those references to those proxies, and it keeps those proxies. If you need to reuse clips in another project, this is going to be a massive time saver. You're bringing them in right as proxies ready to go. You can now apply corner rounding to your video clips. So I have a clip here on my timeline, on my canvas. So you go to visual effects and you have corner rounding right here. You can drag this on top of your clip, and in the right side in the properties, you can change the radius of this rounding. And you can see now the rounding is equal on all the corners, but you have these corners here you can turn on and off, so you can only round 2 corners if you want, or just 1, or whichever you decide to round. And this is how you can control it. This rounding actually works as a mask, and if you have this clip on top of another clip, you will see that where the corners are rounded, you can see through. So you can place your video on top of another one and you can still keep the rounding going. Camtasia 2021 has improved grouping handling. In previous versions of Camtasia, if you had a group of clips or objects on your timeline, like I do have here, and I group them, if I want to edit the contents of this group, I could double click and the group would just pop open like this, but it would be editing it in place. Well, in Camtasia 2021, you can now have a better group editing. If I have these clips that are grouped here, I can double click and watch what happens. If I go inside of the group, now the group opens all the way up here and I can edit the contents. And in fact, you have these tabs here now, and it shows you what group you're in, and you can edit this group as its own timeline. And when you're done editing, you can go back to the main timeline. So you can see your group in here, but you can edit everything inside the group. So this is much more comfortable to work, and it's easier to see. And also, if you have markers here in here, they will keep they will stay in this group. But also, if you go to the main timeline and you move the group, the markers move with the group. So this is much better to edit, because if you had a larger group, it could become very difficult to edit the things inside the group if it was just opening on the timeline like this. But now, with these tabbed groups, you can go inside and you can edit everything, and you know that whatever you're doing in here only applies to the group. It's like Camtasia creates another timeline inside the group. So it's just like almost editing another project inside of your main timeline. And if you have multiple groups, watch what happens. You can rename the groups here on the timeline, just like before. This is group 2. And if you go inside of this group, it opens a new tab. So you can now switch between these tab groups to make changes. And when you're done, you can close them and you're back to your main timeline. So this is much more improved right now. So it makes it easy to kind of dial into a specific area of your project. Another interface improvement that's been added to Camtasia 2021 is the ability to resize the track header right here. In previous versions like 2020, if you were trying to resize this area, or if you wanted to type a longer name in a track, you could not do that. So this is my first track. I can't see everything in here because it's being cut off. Well, in 2021, you can actually resize this header of the track, and although it doesn't let you resize it as much as you like make it really, really wide, at least it's an improvement. So you can type a couple of words in here so you can actually see what you're doing in here. So this is great. There is now a new button on the toolbar here to add exported frame to the timeline. So if you went to any point in your timeline and you wanted to grab a snapshot of your current frame and insert it as an image, you can still do that by right-clicking on the playhead right here and selecting Add Exported Frame. And this is what it does. It just creates a snapshot of the current frame and it adds it here. But now this is much easier. If you just go here and you click on this photo icon, it does the same thing. Another great improvement has been the ability to add properties, custom properties and quick properties to annotations and objects like that. So even it works in groups. So in the previous versions of Camtasia, if you had an annotation with text inside of it, you had to double click to change the name of the text, the content of the annotation. And it was even worse if you had to reuse this as a reusable component here. It wasn't exposing the text. So if you were grouping this into a group, you had one group with 2 annotations here and you wanted to create a reusable asset, even if you grouped it together like that, you could not change it in the properties here, and the text was not available. So you always had to go in to double click, open the group, double click on that, and you get to the text. Well, in Camtasia 2021, this has been improved, and this is now possible to go to annotations, any one of these annotations, and you just drag them onto your timeline. Let's say we drag another one in here just as an example. And now if you group these together like this, it becomes a group with 2 annotations inside. And notice the text in here, ABC. If you go to the right panel in the properties, you can see now that you have quick properties. This is another panel here that allows you to change the content of this group separately without having to go into it. And even if you duplicate this, it will give you the ability to resize, to change and do whatever you want. And the text here, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this gives you quick access to all of the text fields inside of the group and all of the annotations that you have, even changing the color and fonts and everything else you can do in here. And each one is now treated separately like that. And what's more, you can actually click on this here, Quick Property Editor, to bring up this panel that allows you to even give labels to these properties. So this was something you could do before only on a very limited number of components, usually those that came with Camtasia, and they only exposed these fields and labels through a specific interface just for those ones, because there was no interface for you to modify these. But now, look, if I want to create one that says, you know, first name, and let's call it last name, you know, I'm creating labels for this and saving it. So now these labels appear in the fields on the right side here. And if I'm creating this as a reusable component or reusable asset, I can add it to my library, and every time I bring this into my timeline, I have these fields available here for me to customize. So this obviously opens up the door for creating multiple assets you can redistribute to your team or share them for free or whatever with other users, and they will come pre-built with all these fields. So this is great. Placeholder timings can now be personalized in the settings. So in previous versions of Camtasia, if you wanted to add a placeholder, if you were creating a placeholder from a video clip that existed before, so if I have this clip in here and I right click and say I want to convert it to placeholder, the placeholder will have the length of that clip. If you inserted a new placeholder somewhere on your timeline by pressing P, that would have a 1 minute default length. In Camtasia 2021 now, you can right click and add a placeholder again, but there is an option now in preferences to change the timing for new placeholders. This is the only option that's been added here, and all of these options have been reordered to be alphabetical, but the placeholder was not available in previous versions. So now if I want to say all of my placeholders should be maybe 10 seconds long, I can change this option here, click OK, and now if I press P, it's going to make a placeholder that is 10 seconds long only. So that is great. It could be a time-saving feature if you work a lot with placeholders from scratch. Improved project handling in Camtasia 2021 means that you can work better with your collaborators on projects. In the past, it was quite annoying because you had the project as one file in Camtasia, and then all of the assets were all over the place. If you were recording in one folder and you brought in videos from another folder, the pendant files were kept separate, so you could easily lose your media and move the project. And you know, if you needed to keep things together, you had to go to the file menu and export it as a zip project. So that was an extra operation. But in Camtasia 2021, there is now an option to save a project as a standalone project. So what this means is, if I go to the file menu and save as, I can choose a name for my project, Standalone Project, for example, and there is now an option here to create standalone project. If I tick this box, it will save my project, and now every media file that I add into my project, like this video, for example, and another video, so I put them on my timeline, and so on, it will be copied to this standalone project folder. It's actually a folder, although you don't see it like that on disk. If you go to disk, all you see is standalone project.tscproj, which is the extension for a Camtasia project. This is the project that I selected. It's 2 kilobytes, and if I have added now media files in this project and I put it on my timeline, I click File and Save again. This time I go back to this project folder. Now the size is 99 megabytes for a single file. It's actually not a file, it is a folder, as it says in here. So Camtasia kind of masks everything else inside of this folder, and it makes it look like a project with that extension. But inside of this folder, all of your media files are copied. So if I double click, I go inside and I see the project itself in here and all the media files. And watch what happens if I add more media to this project. So I'm going to add a picture here to my project and click Save, and you will see that the file has arrived in this folder here. So when you save, all of the dependent media is copied inside of that folder, and it's kept together without you having to do anything. And this also works with assets that you bring in from your library. So for example, if you're worried that you might be using some assets from your library that you want to share with your colleagues when you transfer that folder over, all you have to do is look, you just drag that asset into your project. Maybe it's an intro. This one happens to have sound files and animation and my logo on it, and watch what happens if I save now and I go to that folder. All of my media is right here, my logos, my song file, it has all been copied in here. So this is great. One thing that it doesn't do is when you remove some media from your project, it doesn't actually remove it from this folder here. So watch what happens. I go to media and I delete them from my timeline, and I delete them from the media bin. I say delete unused media. Now I am not using anything, and I'm saving this project. File, save. If I go back, the media is still here, but at least it keeps everything in one folder without you having to worry about it. So this is great if you have a little space on your main drive, or you want to keep your projects organized in a single place. All you have to do is just save your project as a standalone project, and then when you open that and work on it and you save it, it will take care of bringing in there all of the dependent files. So this is great. Another feature requested by some members of the community has been to include an audio level meter. So you can have this if you play an audio file. You can see this meter here showing. And it's very easy to see whether your audio is clipping or not, if the level is too high or too low. And if you click on this, it will open a sidebar here with the audio meter showing. One improvement to audio editing has been that you now have an option to auto-normalize loudness on a clip basis. So if you have more audio tracks on your project, you can choose which ones to normalize and which ones not to. Previous versions did not have this. If I'm looking in Camtasia 2020, I have an audio clip selected. I only have mix to mono and gain controls. In Camtasia 2021, if I click on a clip, I have auto-normalize loudness. So this is an audio track with some music. I click on another clip that has audio. I also have that option here again. This option was only available on a per project basis, which is still there now. If you go to project settings, you can still have that, and that works project wide. But then you can also change this for every media that has sound. Another improvement to audio editing, when you're using multiple tracks that have sound on them, maybe you have one for speech and one for music, like a background track, you can now emphasize the speech automatically using one of the audio effects that's been added in Camtasia 2021. If you go to audio effects, I have here two tracks. One of them has a video tutorial where I'm speaking on, and the other one is an audio track. Watch what happens if I play both of them right now. You can't really understand the voice because the music is too loud. And just copy some of this text that's random here. So what to do? This is the effect that's been added here in the audio effects section to emphasize the audio. So this way you decide which track you care about the most, that you want to be heard, like your narration or your voice, and you can automatically duck the other tracks when that track is playing. So if you have like a background track for music, when you're talking, you can automatically duck that without reducing it completely. So let me show you. I'm going to add the emphasize effect to my voice track here. And let me just zoom in a bit, drag that here. And now you can see that the effect was added, and you have some options in the right side panel here. You can emphasize for how much. So that means to lower the volume of the other tracks as opposed to the main track. You can also have the ramping position on the outside for the duration or inside, which means the other tracks will lower volume depending on this option here. So if you want the audio tracks, the music, to kind of go lower volume before you start talking or before this actual other tracks comes in, you can keep it on the outside. Or if you want it to start right at the moment when you start speaking, you can put it on the inside. So by default it's outside. You can ramp in, you can customize the seconds, how long the duration of the ramp should be. So let's see what happens here. If I'm playing just before my voice clip and just copy some of this text. So you notice that as soon as like a second before the clip came in, the volume of the music track was lowered. And let's go back to the end here. So you can adjust. So the volume comes back up as soon as the clip ends. So this is much easier to edit like this, because in the past, if you needed to achieve this effect, you had to toggle the audio points for the other tracks. So you had to kind of double click on this, double click on here, double click before, double click after that, and then you drag this segment down to create this ducking effect. But now you don't have to do this, because this effect does it automatically when the clip that needs to be heard comes in. And the other cool thing is, if you move your clip further, earlier or later, this ducking effect goes with it. So now watch, if I'm playing this in another position and just copy. So it doesn't matter where the clip is moved, the clip that needs to be heard best just moves independently, and everything else has the volume ducked before this one starts. You can obviously, change the ramp in and ramp out to be longer or shorter. You can also change the volume difference between the surrounding media and the main volume. So if I'm making this about 50%, and just copy some of this text that's random here, the reduction is not so great. So if I move it all the way up to 97 and just copy some of this text, the reduction is much more strong. It's almost complete volume reduction. So 80% is the default. I can do, like 90, for example. And just copy some of this text. So I can see some uses for this. This is a really cool feature. So these are some of the new features and improvements added in Camtasia 2021 that I could discover while testing it. Don't forget, it releases officially on the 27th of April 2021, and you will be able to check it out by downloading a free trial using the link in the description below when this becomes available. As a general feel, I found Camtasia much more responsive. It works faster and switches between tasks and context much smoother than the previous version, even while using a longer project with many clips in it. Your experience may be different. I assume it's up to your computer's configuration and performance also, but I feel like they have done a lot of work in that area. I'd love to hear your opinion on whether it's worth upgrading to this new version of Camtasia or not. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you have any questions, feel free to add them and I will reply as soon as possible. There are a couple of ways to upgrade to Camtasia if you decide to do so. One is obviously to go and buy it from TechSmith. If you haven't bought it before, you will obviously get the newest version. Or you can upgrade using the maintenance plan, which is like a subscription you pay every year. It's much lower in price, but it gives you free updates for a full year in case TechSmith releases new versions. So if you had upgraded like 30 days before the launch version, you would have got the Camtasia 2020, but you would have gotten also the free upgrade to 2021. And this costs less than a full purchase of the software. Regardless of the route you choose, you will find the link to the download page in the description. Thank you for watching this far. If this video was useful, like it, share it, and please subscribe to my channel for more Camtasia videos, tutorials. In the next few weeks, I will be publishing more as I discover the feature and the launch date approaches. Thank you for your time. See you next time.